enjoyed the rumors of the punishments that the Countess of Ellister practiced, so she did not worry about the life of her half-sister. Now that Canna had returned to the estate and reinforced her presence in the house with an additional contract with Cullen, Isabel had little chance of sending her sister outside. Such news from her mother confused the girl. She was not at home for several hours, but now everything was different. Isabel was angry with her brother. What she heard from her mother seemed like a lie to her, but somewhere deep inside her, an uncontrollable rage was forming. Cullen was at work in the office when suddenly a strong punch hit the door. Without waiting for an invitation, Isabel threw open the door with the intention of changing Cullen's mind. The girl aggressively headed to her brother's table. She was infuriated that Canna was taking advantage of Cullen's soft heart and deceiving him that she was able to become a doctor during her absence. The guy did not look up from studying the reports, but he assured the girl that even after one procedure, Lucy's condition worsened. Isabel could not contain her irritation. Her brother was too naive and did not understand that Lucy no longer needed treatment. Suddenly, Isabel did not follow her thoughts and admitted that if treatment was possible, then this was not a reason to let Canna into the house. Because of these words, Cullen interrupted the study of documents. The mood in the room changed dramatically. Cullen's mind began to fill with darkness. He could not believe that for his sister, Lucy's health was a trifle. To Isabel, Lucy was just the daughter of a lesser servant, so she didn't care about how the girl lived with a paralyzed face. Cullen's face was contorted with anger. Now that Canna had revealed the truth about their family to him, he had a different view of his family's attacks on his half-sisters. Isabel slapped her hands on the table, demanding to know why Cullen cared more about Lucy than she did about her sister. Such a conversation exhausted Cullen. He tiredly closed his eyes and asked Isabel to leave his office without argument. The next moment, the door of the office was slammed loudly, meaning that the conversation was over, and Isabel was standing in shock in the hallway because for the first time in her life, her brother had thrown her out of the door. The girl decided not to ignore this attitude, so she went in search of Orsini in order to create an alliance with him against Canna. Isabel found her brother at the training ground, who looked exhausted from training with a sword, but she was annoyed that Orsini had made no attempt to kick Canna out of the manor. Orsini was in his thoughts. Not even the appearance of his sister could tear him out of them. The girl patted her brother on the shoulder, trying to attract attention, but he just stared at the ground. Isabel screamed dramatically that no one understood her intentions, but her game did not work. Orsini remained seated. The girl returned to the estate. When she walked past the door to her father's office, she thought for a second to ask him for help, but suddenly, realizing the man's temper, the girl quietly walked past the room so as not to disturb her father at work. The estate was empty. Although Isabel did not find accomplices, the thought of turning to her father for help frightened her. Ever since she was a child, Isabel found her father to be a terrible man. Although he did not punish or reprimand her, his aura frightened her. For many years, the man retained the status of a young, handsome, and very powerful man. Isabel had always envied her father, his skills and talents, but watching him, she understood a lot. In fact, Alexandro Addis looked at all the members of the Addis family in the same way. His gaze was full of undisguised indifference. Looking out the window, Isabel saw Canna coming down into the garden. Without waiting, the girl ran to the exit of the manor and managed to catch up with Canna at the foot of the porch. Isabel grabbed the girl by the arm. She tried to be friendly, asking her about her mood after returning home. Although all Isabel's thoughts were about how disgusted she was to be next to Canna's black hair. Canna supported the conversation with her sister, which surprised Isabel very much, because she had never looked up at someone from the Addis family before. The girls walked along the garden alley to the gazebo. Isabel decided to take the opportunity to find out all the details about Cullen's deal with Canna. Smiling feignedly, Isabel asked to teach her how to handle Lucy, as many doctors could not cope with the disgust when they saw the girl. Canna refused, her voice firm. She did not want to give her sister knowledge that could harm Lucy. The girl pulled her hand out of Isabel's grip, pushing her aside. Canna made it clear that she did not intend to play along with Isabel and try to become close people. Isabel remained standing in the middle of the alley, confused as Canna continued her walk. Unbeknownst to herself, Isabel found herself in her bedroom, where a servant brought a soothing tea for her mistress to restore her condition. Coming out of her stupor, the girl could not restrain herself from cursing in the direction of Canna. Isabel was worried that she did not understand Canna's behavior, because at first she politely communicated with her in the garden, after which she sharply demanded not to pretend to be close to each other. The girl still has not come up with a plan to banish Kana. With such new behavior, it will be difficult to use the old methods. Over the past 7 years, Isabel has not stopped considering Kana a pest who brings discord to the family. The girl tried to find arguments in favor of stopping hating her stepsister, but the habit of blaming Kana for all family troubles cannot leave her mind. When Kana Addis was born, many scandalous rumors spread around the Duke's family. With her black hair and eyes, the girl was not only considered a horror story about the monsters of the Black Mist, but also gave rise to rumors that the Addis family may be involved in the cult of worshippers of the Black Mist. Rumors had been circulating for a long time, so at some point they took on a new form when people began to believe that Duke Addis had colluded with his admirers, which resulted in Kana. At some point, the discussions got out of hand, and Alexandro Addis was on the verge of losing his title as Duke. However, during that period, there was a monster attack on the capital, which the Duke had to fight, so after the victory, many rumors simply disappeared. Isabel knew from the history of the continent that the Addis and Valentino families were the only ones who could stand up to the Black Mist, so she believed in the rumors being false. Years passed after the attack. Stories of an alliance with her admirers no longer spread, but Kana continued to grow, and her hair and eyes did not change. The Duke's illegitimate daughter was the personification of failure, disgust, and filth, so it is not surprising that outsiders treated her the same way as the family. Isabel was pleased to think that there were still people who, like her, found Kana to be nothing more than a filthy insect that interfered with everyone's life. The longer she thought about Kana, the stronger her affection for her sister became, which Isabel tried her best to prevent. So the only solution was that she should kick her sister out of the house. Everything was complicated by the contract that was signed between Cullen and Kana. Suddenly, an idea crept into the girl's head to turn the contract agreements against her sister. The servants brought dinner for the mistress while she made a plan to intervene in Lucy's recovery. Isabel agreed to her plan without hesitation. She did not care about other people's experiences. Now her main goal was to get rid of Kana. A few days passed at Addis Manor, which were calmer than ever. Kana got used to the old bedroom again. In addition to treating Lucy, she spent a lot of time studying the diary kept by Li Juhua. All the pages were saturated with resentment. Li Juhua got the life of an outcast, so she needs to forget about the bright past with her family. She is now Kana Addis, living surrounded by hostility and loneliness at 17. After finishing reading, the girl slammed the diary shut. Li Juhua made many mistakes, but Kana couldn't blame her. The girl understood that all the consequences that Li Juhua faced were only the result of her, Kana's weakness, and fear of changing her life for the better. Life has changed Kana a lot. Now she clearly saw the vile qualities in her relatives, which broke the life of not only her, but also Li Juhua. So Kana dreamed of leaving home as soon as possible, because Lucy's treatment was progressing well. A servant came into the girl's room. Accompanied by several guards, she said that she had an order from the mistress of the estate. Kana jumped off the couch as the guards headed in her direction. The men grabbed the girl. She tried to resist, but her hands held her back. So jerking again, the girl rudely ordered to let her go, and she would go to meet Chloe herself. Suddenly, Kana panicked. The maid said that Mistress Lucy was in critical condition, so the healer was urgently required to her chambers. The girl was silently escorted to Lucy's bedroom, where some family members had already gathered. Cullen was sitting next to the girl's bed. He did not expect to see Kana, but Chloe and Isabel watched the situation from the sidelines, not interfering in the conversation. Kana noticed that her stepmother and sister were acting very dramatic. There was no grief on their faces because of Lucy's condition, but tears were flowing down each of their faces. On the other side of the bed is Lucy's personal servant. You can see from the girl's face how frightened she is by what happened. When Kana glanced at the bed where the little girl's pale body lay, she felt a heaviness in her chest. Cullen did not turn to his sister. All his attention was on Lucy. Kana hadn't expected to see him in such a broken state. At the moment, Cullen was like an open book, and his experiences were easy to read. Isabel silently watched Kana's confusion, but she knew that this was not the best time for a fight. Kana moved closer to the bed. She had to ask Cullen to move away so she could examine the girl. His sister's voice changed from anxiety to anger. The guy gritted his teeth so as not to snap when Canna tried to check on Lucy's condition. Suddenly, Cullen slapped his sister's arm, throwing her palm aside. Now he couldn't let Canna do anything for Lucy because he blamed her for what had happened. A large red bruise had formed on the palm of Canna's hand, and now Cullen considered it a mistake to allow himself to trust the promise of recovery. The guy turned away from his sister, but it was not the first time she had encountered his impulsiveness, so she tried to examine the girl again. Cullen breathed heavily as Canna got a little closer to the bed. Such a reaction made the girl stop. Jumping up from his chair, the guy hissed through his teeth that it was all Canna's fault, because before the treatment with needles, Lucy had never been so sick. Canna could not be surprised anymore. Working in the hospital, she saw different reactions of relatives, so the fact that Cullen was now unconsciously, but capricious, did not anger her in any way. The brother was taken aback by his sister's calm voice. He did not want to start a tantrum, although she suggested that he do it. To bring the guy into a rational state, Canna yelled at him and promised that he could hate her for life, but only after she did her job and restored Lucy's health. Jumping up to her brother, she bluntly told him that they had little time to understand the cause of the illness, and that Cullen's behavior only hindered rather than helped. The girl pointed her finger in Lucy's direction. Her breathing became too heavy. She had no time to be affectionate. She bluntly told Cullen that if he did not leave her path, then baby Lucy would be over in a couple of hours. Isabel, who silently watched from the corner, was shocked at how brazen her stepsister was with Cullen. The guy did not find an answer, but he did not interfere with his sister either. He clenched his hands into fists as the girl walked past him and reminded him to stay away from Lucy while she worked with her. The quarrel was over. Now all attention was riveted on Canna, so the girl needed to show maximum professionalism in identifying the diagnosis. Hoarse exhalations came out of Lucy's mouth. For all the time of treatment, Canna did not notice such symptoms in her. Lucy's face turned red. She began to feel feverish, but in the morning, after the procedure, nothing of the disease was noticeable. In addition to the initial symptoms with shortness of breath and fever, Canna noticed that from time to time, the girl's body shuddered in convulsions, which means that now she is not facing the consequences of facial paralysis. Lucy was not seized by a new disease, although the girl's clothes were soaked as if she had recently been caught in the rain. Until a few days ago, Lucy looked cheerful and healthy, so the disease could not appear on its own. Canna glanced at the girl's personal servant, who was crying nonstop at the head of the bed. Slapping the bed, Canna ordered the maid to report on everything Lucy had eaten during the day. Isabel was alarmed. When Canna began to interrogate the servants, the girl realized that her sister was beginning to understand something. To calm the situation, Isabel stood up for the servants. In her opinion, Canna began to cross the boundaries of what was allowed while standing next to the sick girl. Cullen did not understand why his sister suddenly began to stand up for Lucy, because she had never been interested in the girl's well-being. Isabel has begun to put the plan into action. Now that Lucy is ill, she can convince Cullen that Canna has never studied medicine, and all her promises are just an excuse to stay in the house. Canna paid no attention to Isabel, and again ordered the servants to report all the food that Lucy had brought. The maid looked at Isabel apprehensively, then stammered and tried not to say anything superfluous. Canna was getting closer to the truth. She herself made the menu for Lucy after the girl began to recover, which meant that the maid was hiding something, and the girl could eat a dangerous product. Canna got tired of waiting. She menacingly demanded to tell about everything that could be changed in her dietary recommendations. The maid was trapped. She didn't know what consequences awaited her, so she silently looked at Canna. Before the servants were ready to say anything, Isabel screamed through the room, demanding that the interrogation be stopped. Cullen and Canna took notice of the girl as she jumped up from the couch. Isabel was infuriated that everything had gone too far. Canna most likely noticed the deception, so she had to end these endless questions. The girl decided to verbally attack Canna again, using manipulations with active care for Lucy. Isabel looked at her brother and accused Canna of cheating, who, under the guise of medical help, took the nefarious step of worsening Lucy's health in order to stay in the family home for a long period. But Isabel's next words that for the sake of Lucy you can't do what Canna does finally showed that everything was a planned poisoning. Canna has figured out the deception. Lucy will not die. She will continue to have symptoms of poisoning and fever for several days, after which she will be fine. Isabel grabbed the doorknobs while her sister stood in a daze. Forcefully opening the doors, Isabel ordered the guards to take Canna away and lock the girl in the bedroom. The guards looked at each other. They hadn't expected to receive such an assignment, and one of them tried to object. Isabel is more angry. She is one of the pure-blood members of the Addis family, so everyone in the manor must obey her. Chloe watched her daughter's hysterics. She already understood what she was trying to do. Therefore, the woman decided to support Isabel and also ordered the guards to take Canna, because now, as a doctor, she will not be able to help Lucy as she is in an agitated state. A smile appeared on Isabel's face. Now that her mother was on her side, she helped complete the plan. The guards who stood in the corridor reacted with doubt to the assignment of the lady of the house, but they had no choice to resist. The men began to slowly approach Canna. They didn't want her to act rashly, so they politely asked her to come with them. The girl decided not to restrain herself any longer. She screamed that a sick girl without quick treatment could get even sicker. Isabel waited from the corner for the guards to do their job, but she was annoyed by how slowly they tried to deal with the girl, as if they were afraid of harming the exiled aristocrat. Canna resisted the guards, but Isabel was already openly demanding that the girl be taken away using brute force. Canna was tired of fighting off the hands of men. She no longer knew how fashionable it was to convince everyone that this was not her mistaken treatment. Suddenly, one of the guards picked up the girl and threw her over his shoulder to carry her out of Lucy's bedroom. Canna hung upside down, her position at a disadvantage, and now the resistance was ineffective. Cullen was tired of tolerating the whole circus that his sister had arranged. He approached the guard, ordering him to stop everything. Isabel did not count on her brother's intervention, so she did not have time to orient herself. My brother demanded to stop all this disgrace before it got worse. Canna did not appreciate her brother's act. He had never interfered with the girl's problems before. The guards tried to say something, but Cullen had already picked up Canna and lifted her from the guard's shoulder. Determination flashed across the boy's face, as if he had just done the most important thing in his life. In the past, he always took the position of an observer who was away from events. And even if Canna noticed him, the guy did not make any attempts to approach his sister. And now, Canna was very embarrassed that her brother was holding her in his arms, so she asked to let her go. Cullen gently put the girl on her feet and apologized for what had happened. Then, turning to the guards, he ordered them to leave the bedroom. Isabel saw the guards quickly run out the door. Now her plan was definitely doomed. The girl had already lost trust in her brother's eyes, but in order to somehow save her face, she shouted words of concern for Lucy to the last. The brother approached Isabel. He was furious that she dared to approach little Lucy. The girl fell silent. Now that the guy was furious, she couldn't control him. Therefore, she decided to pretend to be a victim, because Cullen is now taking his anger off on her, and not on Canna, who made a mistake with the treatment. In the eyes of the girl, the brother became a traitor who put the contemptible loser higher than the opinion of his own sister. Isabel needed to find support. The girl decided to involve her mother in the quarrel. With tears in her eyes, the girl began to complain that Cullen did not need her care for Lucy. Chloe had accumulated more wisdom than Isabel in her life. She was well aware that as long as Canna was under Cullen's protection, nothing would help them get rid of her. The woman got up from the sofa. She decided to leave the bedroom, justifying herself by saying that she was too tired of scandals and loud screams. Isabel tried to stop the woman, but she was already heading for the door, saying that it was very late and she needed a rest. Grabbing Isabel's hand in a strong grip, the woman dragged her with her so that she would not do any more stupid things. Her daughter resisted awkwardly, promising to stay in Lucy's room to monitor her health, although now she was afraid that Canna would say too much if Isabel suddenly left the room. The door slammed shut behind his mother, but Cullen asked his sister to follow the woman away. Isabel tried to press for pity, but Cullen threatened that he would not ask twice, and such a tone made Canna smirk. Canna realized that her sister had been acting suspicious lately. Now she wondered what she was hiding. Approaching her brother, Canna asked him not to chase Isabel away. Now she wanted to reveal the big lie that she was hiding. Without waiting for Isabel's reaction, Canna turned to the maid again to find out what Lucy might have eaten. Isabel had not calmed down. Now that Canna continued the interrogation, she hoped that the maid would be smart enough to remain silent. Suddenly, Cullen also turned to the servants and asked them to help Canna find out the truth. Because of such an act, Isabel was shocked. Calming down, the maid said that all the food was prepared in accordance with the menu, and Lucy did not eat any other dishes. However, one day after eating, Lucy drank tea, which seemed to taste different from the previous one. Canna asked the maid to bring the tea that Lucy was drinking. But now Isabel was terrified that Canna would be able to guess what exactly was wrong with the herbs, although Isabel was assured that only an expert could determine the authenticity of the tea. The servants brought a tray with dishes and a package of tea. Everyone sat around the table where the maid had placed the tray, so Canna began to study. The girl took the jar where the leaves for brewing were stored. She poured the leaves on the table. Cullen noticed that this tea was fragrant and had a lot of lavender leaves. After examining the small petals of the inflorescence, Canna realized that this tea was definitely not made according to the menu that she had compiled. After sifting the leaves a little, the girl noticed more unusual inflorescences among the petals. Isabel laughed ironically that everyone could drink tea with lavender leaves and not have to die. The girl began to praise how delicious this tea was, so Lucy could just be wrong when she drank it. Isabel sticks to the new plan. Now she just had to convincingly pretend to know this tea. After sorting a few leaves into a glass, Canna tried to figure out what the foreign plants looked like. The girl put the jar on the table and said that she doubted the authenticity of the tea. Isabel suddenly forgot everything she had been talking about. Now she was closer than ever to failure. Jumping up from her chair, the girl slammed her hands on the table and accused Canna of just making stupid things. Grabbing some tea from the table, Isabel decided to deflect suspicion from herself. She handed the tea to her brother, asking him to smell it and tell him if it could be different from what they drank all the time. Without waiting for a response from Cullen, the girl shoved the leaves into his hand, hinting that he would definitely be right if he tested the herbal tea himself. As Cullen tried to sort out the tea, Isabel turned her attention to the maid and demanded that she smell the herb as well. Cullen examined the lavender flowers. After examining him, he had no doubt that the tea was really ordinary. Stuttering, the servant also said that she could only smell the scent of lavender and nothing else. Such arguments were enough for Isabel to enter the fight with Canna again and begin to rejoice over her victory. The girl was able to convince the others that the tea was lavender. Now even Canna had nothing to answer to all the general confidence. Isabel mistook silence for victory, arrogantly declaring that she would personally go to her father with a request to send Canna away from the estate, since she had deceived herself into the house. Canna had expected Isabel to admit her mistake, but now that she was mired in lies, she was not going to spare her. Isabel pretended to be cute. She played the role of a person who would never hurt her little sister. The girl was immersed in her victory. She did not notice how calm Canna was. Now she was looking forward to never allowing her to return to the manor again. Suddenly, Canna asked Isabel to stop being so excited, which left the girl in a stupor. Isabel's ridiculous attempts to justify herself made Canna lose patience. Now the girl decided to reveal the whole truth. Taking a jar of tea leaves, the girl hinted that they would be enough to conduct an experiment. Canna laughed. She offered to make tea for Isabel, who had so assiduously claimed that she loved lavender decoction that she should have no trouble drinking it. All thoughts flew out of Isabel's mind. Her heart was beating wildly in her chest, but she didn't know how to change the situation in her favor. The maid prepared the drink and placed the teacup next to Isabel. However, in the next second, there was a loud stomp, and Isabel disappeared from her seat on the couch. Canna wasn't surprised. She had assumed from the beginning that the solution would be simple. Such a bluff worked well. The girl who so desperately defended the benefits of tea suddenly did not dare to try it herself. Cullen and Canna watched as Isabel stumbled toward the door, wailing along the way that she still had things to do urgently. The girl ran so fast that her shoes tripped over the floorboards, but she managed to shout out that such checks were pure deception. Isabel ran along the corridors without stopping. Now her life would become more difficult. Tears rolled down her face, but she did not want to call for her guilt. But she would always remember her brother's look, his eyes full of disgust and dislike, which were so similar to their father's. Cullen was in no hurry to leave Lucy's bedroom. It was hard for him to believe in his sister's betrayal. From the abundance of worries, his head began to hurt, so he quickly wanted to figure out what was poisoning the tea. Canna sorted the tea leaves again and pointed out to her brother a red bean flower, which was also purple in color. Cullen and the maid began to examine the evidence. Although it was indistinguishable from tea leaves, Canna said that the dried bean flowers were odorless and visually similar to lavender. Taking 2 different flowers from the pile, the girl showed the differences that the color of the bean flower is slightly darker and the bud is denser. After another glance at the flowers, Cullen noticed that Canna was well versed in botany. However, this did not calm the guy. There was silence in the room before he began to worry about how poisonous the red bean buds could be. Kana brushed off that these buds were just grass, which left her brother in a stupor. The girl said that the danger of these flowers manifests itself only when they are consumed in large quantities, and the symptoms begin with the fact that abdominal pain appears. Cullen was darkened. Lucy's symptoms were more terrible than a simple stomachache. The girl patted her brother on the shoulder, urging him not to worry. She assured him that she knew what to do, so there was definitely no dangerous poison in the tea. Red bean flowers are contraindicated with the medicine that the girl made for Lucy because it contains licorice. Kana explained with a simple example that when red bean and licorice extract are mixed, the toxic properties of bean flowers increase. Kana decided that the purpose of this tea was to make Lucy sick, because only doctors know how to properly interact with licorice. The girl asked the maid for a piece of paper. She began to take notes. The deception was so that Cullen would break the contract with Kana if Lucy continued to be ill. However, when the situation got out of hand, the person who made the switch should already be terrified. But Kana knew that Isabel would escape any punishment. Cullen didn't know what he would do with his sister, but Lucy's condition was more important to him now. The girl finished writing on a sheet of paper a recipe for a decoction that needs to be prepared and given to Lucy to drink, after which the girl will feel better. Kana gave the prescription to the maid, ordering her to go to the apothecary at once and buy everything she needed. When the maid left the room, Cullen suddenly apologized to his sister for the first time for what had happened. The guy sat on the couch without moving after these words came out of his mouth. Kana froze at the exit of the room. She did not see her brother's face, so she could not be convinced of the sincerity of his words. Although Cullen's face was clearly desperate, he did not continue the conversation. The room fell silent. Kana did not move, standing behind her brother. Suddenly, she asked him a question that had been haunting her for a long time: how Cullen had become such a person in the intervening time. The girl thought that it was all about the contract, so she assured the guy that their contract was in force and he did not need to pay additional attention to her. Cullen tried to justify his actions, but his confessions did not make a stronger impression on the girl, so she asked her to stop calling him her sister and return to their usual names. Kana turned around and headed for the exit. She asked her brother to behave as usual, because when he hates her, life becomes easier. At the Otis estate, a month had passed since the incident in Lucy's bedroom. Now the girl was almost completely healthy and could have fun in the garden with Kana. The girl ran to the garden gazebo where her sister was already waiting for her. Lucy's health was good, so the girl could live a full life, but now it was time for a new stage. A servant came to the gazebo with lunch. Over the past month, Kana did not try to get closer to her family except for Lucy. The girl clearly understood for what purpose she came to the Addis estate. Lucy began to happily recall her dream, where she and Kana visited a flower meadow together and had a picnic on it. The amusement in Lucy's eyes pleased Kana, and the fact that the treatment went quickly enough and with positive dynamics gave the girl confidence, although she hoped to stay in the mansion longer. Lucy didn't have many friends in the house, so she jumped at every opportunity to spend time with those who were friendly to her. Lucy invited her sister to take a walk around the city together, and they could also take Cullen with them on the trip. The girl began to doubt when Cullen appeared in the gazebo. The guy promised that he would not interfere with the trip and accompany them if Kana did not want to spend time together. Lucy was upset, while Kana, hiding her irritation, tried not to refuse her brother's offer, because his speculations are empty, and she doesn't care if he will be with them or not. From the moment she returned to the estate, the girl had two goals. First, she needed to get consent to divorce Duke Valentino, and before leaving, take her alchemy tools from her laboratory. So she had no other things to do in the estate, and she did not intend to stay longer than she should. Taking a cup of tea from the table, Kana decided it was time to meet her father. Although she was ashamed that in their society, there was still a rough tradition that permission for many things had to be obtained from a man. Getting up from the table, the girl said that she had one case to solve, and then she would return to Lucy, and they would discuss a trip to the city. Lucy was glad that the girl would be back soon. After a month at the manor, Kana is very tired of everyone trying to call her sister. Stroking the girl's hair, the girl thought that she was glad that Lucy had the opportunity to enjoy a normal life. Cullen remembered his last conversation with Kana, her words about how he should hate her stuck in his head. That conversation was more like a quarrel. Cullen could not understand why the girl wanted to leave the estate if she herself came to it after leaving the Valentino family. Even behind closed doors, loud voices could be heard as Canna tried to prove to Cullen that her desire was to live a free life somewhere alone. The girl asked the guy to be patient for a while, after which he would never see her. After that conversation, Cullen began to doubt whether he had negative feelings for his sister, because it seemed to him that she was the one who hated him. Such a realization hurt his feelings. Cullen reached out to take Canna's hand, but the girl had already turned to the door. He looked after her. The guy could not understand how exactly he had earned her contempt for him. But a new one was added to this question: how, as a child, Cullen was always ready to strike. However, now he couldn't understand what exactly she had earned his contempt for at that time. After all, being a loner, Canna always had a score that she had to learn to notice. As a child, Cullen was greatly influenced by the fact that everyone around him considered the existence of Canna a mortal sin. She was a flower that was mired in the abyss of filthy rumors and insults. But there was also her kindness, which always manifested itself in a desire to help Cullen with his requests. This slight naivety which allowed the girl to endure all the stones that flew in her direction. That was the truth why Cullen had allowed himself to sew it on since birth. The reasons were simple. With each new acceptance of insults, I wanted to throw another one. But now that she had changed, Cullen's habits had flinched. Yes, Canna Addis was born with dark hair, but this does not give him the right to look down on her while he prepares a new blow, because her birth is not her choice. Cullen himself is stuck in his own prejudices, but now that Canna is not that scared girl, he should reconsider his attitude towards her. The guy understood that he would never rewrite the past that he had committed towards his sister, only because he realized it now. He found the answer late, but now he has Lucy, so he still has a chance to fix someone else's life. Canna's voice brought Cullen out of his thoughts. The girl was just saying goodbye to Lucy. The girl left the gazebo, but the guy did not dare to say anything goodbye. Over the past time, a strange feeling had constantly appeared in his chest. Cullen was torn between the idea of fixing everything or leaving everything as it was, because his sister already had a lot to worry about. Canna headed for the exit from the garden. She assumed that the Duke must be home by now. Noticing the estate behind the trees, the girl began to worry, but quickly pulled herself together. Canna reached the main entrance of the mansion, but did not meet anyone along the way. The corridor to her father's office was also empty, so no one interfered with her. She had not been in this part of the house for a long time, so she was worried. But having gained courage, the girl knocked on the door. She expected that the man would not let her out, when suddenly an invitation to enter was heard from the room. Canna exhaled. She reminded herself of her plan to do everything possible to get her father's permission to divorce and leave the Duchy of Addis. Taking hold of the door, the girl hesitated for a while. She needs to be brave to ask for permission, and she cannot escape. The doors swung open with a sharp jolt, but Canna still froze in the aisle. At the other end of the office, at the desk, sat the Duke. He was not distracted from the papers, even when the girl began to approach him. For Canna, time seemed to stand still as soon as she took a couple of steps. All my father's habits were preserved. He still wore glasses while working, and the sound of a mechanical pen broke the silence in the room. Even the habit of sitting in perfect clothes has not disappeared. Quietly approaching the table, the girl asked her father to give her some time for a serious conversation. The man did not distract himself from the reports, but reminded his daughter that she could start a discussion, because if he did not have time, he would not have let her into the office. Even the habit of working incessantly had not gone anywhere, so Canna had no choice but to voice her proposal. Her father's dry phrases knocked down the girl's confidence a little, but she reminded herself that now was the only chance to get the consent she needed. So the girl gathered her courage and said that she had come to her father to approve her divorce from Duke Valentino. The man's hand froze over the letter when he heard his daughter's request. Alexandro Addis looked up from the papers, looked at his daughter, and asked again what kind of divorce he was talking about. Without holding back her emotions, Canna shouted that the main reason for the divorce lies in the Valentino family itself. Her father took off his glasses but listened attentively to the girl's story. Canna began to vividly describe how Countess Elister did not treat her. Having the status of a mother-in-law, she had an impact on her life. The girl admitted to all the bullying over the past 7 years, and the fact that even the servants began to treat her not as an aristocrat from the Addis family was the last drop of patience. Clenching at her father's penetrating gaze, Canna decided that no matter how bad her life was, she had to expose all the insults as if the Valentino family was mocking the entire Otis family. Not just her. Her father was silent. So Canna bluntly stated that she was not ready to tolerate the neglect of the status of the Otis family in the eyes of other aristocrats, so she should dissolve the marriage. The silence was oppressive. The girl wanted Alexandro Otis to be imbued with the importance of the family's status as well as she did, so she asked him more insistently for permission. Suddenly, my father announced that he agreed to the divorce and did not ask any more questions. Canna's heart skipped a few beats. Even in her bold dreams, she had not expected such a quick agreement. The father returned attention to the document and assured his daughter that he himself instructed to prepare the divorce documents through the butler. But the girl stood in a stupor in front of her father's table. She expected to hear the wishes to die in the Valentino family rather than consent to divorce, so she again asked if her father was really sure of the decision. Alexandro thought that Canna had changed her mind if she asked again, but the girl swore that her decision to divorce was final. The girl smiled happily, of course. She knew that the status of the family was very important to the Duke, so he couldn't let someone ruin him, even through an illegitimate daughter. Now that the agreement had been obtained, Canna began to worry that her father would decide that she was going to stay at Addis Manor forever. Canna began to come up with the lie that she had always dreamed of leaving the empire and living in a coastal city. She hoped that such a promise would please the Duke's wishes. The girl promised that she would leave the house as soon as the consent to divorce was signed and would never return. But these words shocked the Duke. Canna bowed, wanting to leave the office and wait for the documents, when suddenly her father announced that he had changed his mind about his decision. At first, the girl thought that she had misheard. But when her father said that he would not allow a divorce, she realized that now her life was entangled in iron chains forever. The girl almost lost consciousness from the surprise. The phrase was spinning in her head that her father would not allow a divorce. The man returned to work. For him, the conversation was over. Canna couldn't believe that his mind had changed so quickly and tried to find out the reason for the refusal. Without being distracted from the documents, the man made it clear in a cold tone that he was not obliged to explain his decisions. The girl cried out that you can't just change your mind at one point. She clenched her hands into fists when her father made it clear that he was old enough to change his mind. Alexandro Otis was a powerful man. He did not ask permission from others and did not need explanations either. But unlike her father, it was important for Canna to understand what she had done wrong now, because she feels like an animal that asks permission from its owner. The girl's voice trembled as she clarified whether her father's refusal should be regarded as an order to return to the Valentino estate and continue to endure the punishment of the Countess of Ellister. The man leaned back in his chair. He took out a new folder of documents, but said that Canna should not return to someone else's house. With a quick glance at her daughter, she ordered her to stay at Addis Manor until he decided otherwise. But his next words finally broke the girl's heart, because now she cannot leave the Otis estate without her father's permission. The girl tried to say something, but her father had not finished his speech yet, so after a moment's hesitation, he declared that his daughter would never be outside the empire. And only now did Canna realize her mistake. It was rash to tell her father that she dreamed of something, and if her dream was to leave for other lands, then he would never allow it to happen. Canna realized that her father hated her so much that even the thought that she could realize her dreams made him angry, so if she fell on her knees in front of him, he still wouldn't change his mind. She had forgotten her. Her father had always hated her, so now he would be able to cause her even more suffering. But before leaving, Canna had to have the last word, so she slammed the table hard to get her father's attention. The act did not cause a storm of emotions in the man, but he looked at her, putting the work aside. The girl's aura turned black. She did not hide her anger and told her father that he had just disappointed her very much. Not hoping for an answer, the girl abruptly dropped the phrase that she hoped to change her father's decision in the future. The clock began to strike a melody when the office door slammed shut. Alexandro Otis sat at the table. He bowed his head wearily and did not touch his work letters again. Going out into the corridor, Canna leaned against the door of the office from fatigue, unable to find the strength to go further. From the depths of the corridor came a voice that the girl hoped she would never meet. Isabel was walking towards her, whom Canna had not seen since the incident with Lucy's illness. But instead of the girl, Canna's attention was attracted by the envelope that she was holding in her hand. Isabel didn't know what kind of reaction to expect from her sister, so she was at a distance for now. Canna was not eager for this meeting, but now she could not hide anywhere. Isabel was surprised that Canna was in her father's office, which is already impossible for any of the children to get into. The girl was afraid that her sister might tell about Lucy's poisoning. Coming closer to Isabel, Canna whispered snidely that she can always make the girl's strongest fears come true, so she hopes that she has drawn conclusions. Isabel had been threatened, so she couldn't say anything in response. However, before Canna left the hallway, the girl turned around and clutched the envelope to her chest. The message was beautifully packed, but inside it was an invitation from the imperial family. Isabel smirked. Even the fact that Canna had received an invitation to the second princess's birthday party didn't make her angry.
Like this video. Hit the like button and subscribe for more videos.